Hello and welcome. Now we are aware of all the richness of functionality that's available with Power Query or Dataflow. There are some features like filtering and renaming columns or filling values. Now, do we need Copilot to help us with these basic functionalities? Not really, right? We want Copilot to help us with more complex functionality like pivoting or unpivoting columns, maybe merging and appending queries, and so forth. So let's see how helpful Copilot is in this video. Now here I am in Dataflow Gen 2 and I have Copilot pane enabled by selecting Copilot from the ribbon. So you see it on the right. And the first thing it asks us to do is get data, obviously. So let me create a query with some data in it. Okay, so I've pulled in some weather data. It's basically weather information, temperature, snow, and so forth by date and state. Now, if you notice, date ID is an ID field, which is an integer field, and it's in YYY format. So I want to create a date column using this date ID field. So I'm asking Copilot, create date column using date ID. Let's see if it can figure this out. So it came back it did add a date column, but it was not able to convert it into a date. So not really what I expected. And I can use undo here, click on undo here to undo this step. And let me see if I can ask the question a different way. Okay, this time I'm being a little more specific. I'm saying, create date column using date ID, and date ID is in YYY format. Let's see if this helps. Well, as you see, it did not really work. It's basically came back with the same function and it's a bunch of errors. So, okay, so maybe it's not there yet. So let me undo this step, and then I want to ask my next question. So what I want to do is I want to create a query which from this weather data, create a new query and filter it down to element type equals tmax. Now here is my question to Copilot is create a new query that filters the data by tmax. Notice I'm not giving it the column name. I'm just saying filter it by tmax. Let's see if it can recognize that tmax is a value with an element type column. And that was amazing. That actually worked. It did create a new query here and it filtered element type to tmax. So that's amazing. Now the next thing I want to do is maybe rename this query to call it temperature. So let's see if it can do it. So I'm going to say rename the query as temperature. Well, it came back with sorry, I can't do that. So let me just manually name this as temperature. And the next thing I want to do is use group by. I want to group by this temperature query. I want to group it by date ID and state and get the max, min, and average temperature. So this is what I'm asking. I'm saying group this query by date ID and state and get the average value, max, and min value. So let's see what this comes back with. Look at that. That was amazing. So it did bring back date ID, state, and the average, max, and min value. So that worked out amazing. So that was really impressive. So I'm happy with that. So let's say now I want to add a new column called temperature and then have the value of that being tmax. So this is what I'm asking. Add a new column called temperature with the value of tmax in each row. Now, if you notice what it did was it did create a new temperature column, but it thought tmax is the max value. So it assigned the max value there, which is cool, interesting way of it did that. But that's not really what I want. So this time I'm going to create a new temperature column with tmax. And before doing that, let me undo the previous step. And now actually I need to retype the question once I undo. So this time I'm going to put tmax in quotes so it knows that that's actually the value of that column. And you see that, okay, putting it in quotes worked. So I can actually put tmax in there. So that's okay. So learning something new. So if we have to put text values, we actually have to put it in quotes so it does understand it. So next I want to do something simple. I want to divide average, max, and min values by 10 to get for my logic to work. So that's what I'm asking. Divide average, max, and min by 10. And that worked as well. And these are simple steps, but if you had done it manually, you would have probably created a new column and divided each one by each of those values, average, max, and min, as 10 if you had done it as a manual step. But Copilot was able to achieve this in one step. So it's definitely a good way of doing it using Copilot. Now let me try another operation. Again, this is more of disabling I want to disable staging for this temperature. Similarly, we try to change the name of the query. So I want to see if it can do some of those operations outside of the actual data set itself. So I'm asking the question, disable staging for, actually, let me call this temperature query. So let's see if it's able to do that. It actually added another step, a custom step, which is what I did not want it to do. I just want this to be disabled. So let me undo that step and ask it a different way. Maybe that'll be helpful. So this time I'm saying uncheck enable staging for temperature query. So let's see what it comes back with. Okay, so it came back with it couldn't understand the question. So I think it works just with the actual data, but not with anything else for any of the queries, the properties of the queries, or naming queries, things along those lines. Copilot is able to work with just the data itself. Okay, so next what I want to do is I want to create a reference to weather data, and similar to what we did earlier, I want to filter it this time. Last time it filtered it with Tmax, element type Tmax. This time I want to filter it by element type snow. So this is what I'm asking. Create a new query that references weather data. Call the new query snow and filter the data to snow. So let's see if it gets confused with using snow as a query name and as a value that it needs to filter by. Let's try it out. Okay, so if you notice, what it did was it did create a new query, filtered element type by snow. So that's amazing. But like I think I expected it not to rename the query to snow, but what it did was it did rename the applied step to snow. So anything in the applied step region, I think it works with. It's able to rename it, but not the actual query. So that's a nice thing to know. So I've gone ahead and made some transformations to snow query, and the next thing I want to do is append temperature and snow to create a new query. So I'm asking the question, create a new query by appending temperature and snow. Now let's see what it comes back with. Okay, so it did create a new query, but it combined source 1 and source 2, so maybe it did not understand that I was asking it to append temperature and snow query. So I'm going to undo that step, and I'm going to be more specific and say append temperature and snow query and create a new query. So let's see if that helps. Okay, looks like, yeah, append it did not work. It says it couldn't do it. So looks like that's not supported yet. So I want to at least try unpivoting these columns. So I'm going to ask the question. I now clicked into snow query, and I'm going to say unpivot columns average, max, and min. So let's see if handle unpivot. And it did come back. I'm pleasantly surprised. So it did come with the result that I expected. So it has attributes and values. That's amazing. So append for some reason didn't work. So a few things that I think can be improved on. Yeah, so there are obviously a few things that I'm assuming as Copilot learns, and Copilot is in preview right now. So as it learns, I'm assuming it'll improve, and all the other features will be supported. But this is a really good start, especially pivoting, unpivoting, or any of the other complex activities. Maybe we could even write functions, which we'll try in a future video. So this is really good, and it does typically, if you do this manually, some of the steps you would do it in 2-3 steps, whereas using Copilot you can achieve that in a single step. So overall, I think I'm impressed with Copilot. It'll be nice to see it evolve over time. And as usual, if you have any questions, you can reach out obviEnce.com.